Today, we are continuing to learn from Erica Poellot and her esteemed colleagues as they open up this conversation by taking a deep dive into the many options that families have today beyond our traditional intervention. And it's not only rarely effective, but has oftentimes long, negative, lasting effects. And that can devastate our families sometimes forever. And so, Erica, I invite Dee-Dee and Sophie and Megan to the screen. I'm going to turn it over to you. I have goosebumps. You're all in real life, virtual real life. Turning it over to you. Thanks for being with us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Ellie. And thank you to everybody for joining us for the second webinar in the Families Matter series. We hope that you were able to join us last week as we laid a foundation for how we talk about substance use and supporting families. As I had the chance to introduce myself last week, my name is Reverend Erica Poellot, and I'm the Minister for Harm Reduction and Overdose Prevention Ministries for the national setting of the United Church of Christ. I also serve as the Executive Director of Faith and Harm Reduction, and I'm joining this webinar from my home in the Bronx, New York. Before I invite introductions from my co-presenters, please join me in blessing this time and space we have together. Spirit of love and justice, as we co-create sacred space in our being here together today, space which proclaims that people who use drugs are beloved by God, let us bless this space together. And let us do so in recognition and honor of the ministry that people who use drugs and people who love people who use drugs are giving life to. So we ask, may this space we create in our being together to listen, to learn, to dream, be blessed. May the many stories and experiences embodied here among us be honored and held with care, ours a wisdom born of surviving. May our gathering be an active reclaiming of sacred space for people touched by the war on people who use drugs and drug-related stigma. May it be a place to put down whatever is heavy and to take up what is needed and deserved. May it mourn losses and celebrate resilience, inspire the challenging of systems which harm, not heal, inspire us to dream of and work for a new, more just world. May this space and all who engage with it be blessed. May this community of ours and all who engage with it be blessed. We ask this in all the holy names. We say amen.
Mhm.
So at this point, I would like to invite my co-presenters to briefly introduce themselves. I'm going to ask Dee-Dee to begin. And in keeping with the Nurture the Soul model, I'm going to ask Megan and Sophie to also share how it is with your soul this day. Dee-Dee and I had a chance to answer this question last week, so we're going to make some space for you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. I'm so delighted to be here again and to have so many people, especially representing states all across the nation. Very exciting to be here. My name is Dee-Dee Stout, and I'm a clinician, a professor, an author, consultant. I do a lot of different things, all within the addiction spectrum. I'm here in Emeryville, California, the home of Pixar Studios, and a lot of bio life sciences as well. And I am delighted to be here.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here as well. Big shout out to my Massachusetts homies. I see you in the chat. I am based just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I am a person who used substances problematically for almost 25 years and no longer have a problematic relationship with substances. I have a small business, and we do a lot of work around storytelling and stigma and the ways that we storytell about substance use and incarceration and all those other issues that intersect there. And we do a lot of workforce training and really help lift up voices that don't always get heard in this kind of a public discourse. Oh, should I share? Oh, and how is it with my soul? I can't forget that. I I am in a season of grieving. I just have a lot of grief, a lot of anniversaries, a lot of, my two pets both dying very close to one another in time, and um, just really struggling, or not struggling, experiencing, let me reframe that, experiencing a lot of grief. But I also feel really held, and I trust and believe that I'll be okay. And it's just part of the human experience. And I'm really grateful I get to have a human experience in my life today. So thanks.
Hello, I'm Sophie. I'm coming from Boston, Massachusetts. I have a small pet care business here. And I'm a child of people who have used substances problematically, and I use substances myself. I was recently in Dee-Dee's book about harm reduction, and I'm really happy to be here. My soul, honestly, I'm feeling held by spirit. I feel like I have just this soft place to land with this big open space above me, like I can grab anything that passes by. Feeling open and held.
Thank you so much. I am hoping that this space also is a space in which you continue to feel held. And I heard a couple of you talk about feeling held and held by spirit. And I hope you're also held by this community gathered. And I'm also going to extend that these conversations can be painful and can bring up a whole range of feelings. So really just want to encourage everybody on this webinar who is presenting or listening or bearing witness, really just to be gentle with yourself and reach out if you need. So with this, I would love to launch us into our first question. We've got a couple of questions that we had all decided as a group that we thought we wanted to tackle. And this one is really kind of laying the foundation for, just sharing a bit about your personal journey and what brings you to this conversation specifically. And I will let whomever wants to start.
I guess I'll go first. There's so much that could be shared in that question, but having my own journey with mental health and substance use challenges, and having experienced a lot of trauma, I was incarcerated a lot of deep involvement in the criminal justice system over 11 years of my life as a direct result of the way that we address substance use in the US. And I was unhoused and, cycled through all of the systems of care and uncare that intersect with substance use. Um, and when I get into, like on this health journey that I'm on now, then I wanted to get engaged with helping others and working in the field. So I was a recovery coach. I've been a recovery coach for 11 years. I don't work in direct care anymore, but in those early years, I worked with families a lot, families of adult children, particularly young people, and worked in prevention, and have done a lot of work with young people as well as parents, and now find myself working in the grief space much more than I did 10 years ago, with families that are grieving the loss of loved ones, as well as still, with those who are still alive, trying to figure out what to do and how to support them. And Sophie is my daughter, and she's my only child. And I was involved in the criminal justice system when I was pregnant with her. And I used medication for opioid use disorder, and she was hospitalized during that time. And so I lost custody of her, got her back. Like, it's just been a journey as a parent with substance use challenges, and just we've walked a long road with this as family members, and for myself as someone who used substances.
Yeah, for me, harm reduction has kind of been a way of life. It was the way that I was raised. It was abstinence for a long time. That was what kept us harm free. And then I started using substances when I was 14, tried abstinence, and had to find my own way with harm reduction before I really even knew what harm reduction was. And now as an adult, I get to practice harm reduction with myself and with people around me that use substances. And it's an interesting thing to grow up within it. And I don't know how to put it. It's just shaped the way that I view the world. And it kind of bleeds into all areas of life. And I think it's more of a community. I don't think harm reduction is just for people that use substances.
That's such a good point,
Mm.
Sophie. I really appreciate that. Often when I'm speaking on harm reduction, I'll use examples like automobile harm reduction,
Mm. Mhm.
or motorcycles or bicycles, the things that we do around those areas. And that can often help people to understand the broader strokes of harm reduction as well. And it sounds like you found something similar to that too.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's, the substance use doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It impacts all of the people around us when we use substances problematically, and therefore, like what it looks like to get well or to improve my quality of life, I cannot do in a vacuum. And so as much as we try to separate ourselves into categories and silos, and I'm a this and I'm a that, and I do this and you do that, it's there's no way to pull it all apart. There's no way to separate my experiences from Sophie's. You just can't. Like for her whole life she's been forced to deal with my substance use.
Mm.
Like she has never been free of it, and she probably will never be free of it, and it's and therefore, like, we can't, and so her substance use, I can't entirely separate myself from either. And I've done a bad job in the past, and then I learned more and grew more and got more enlightened, and I think I do a better job with being in relationship with her relationship with substances now. But there's not a single starting point, end point.
Mm.
The ripple doesn't have a fixed circumference. It's about being in community with all of the things and with all of the people.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. That really, I think, speaks to my journey to harm reduction. I was somebody who also navigated for many years a really problematic relationship with substances of a variety of types, and was seeking care and connection in all the spaces that I was aware of. I was aware of 12-step spaces. I was connected to a congregation, and ultimately neither of those really allowed me to show up in those spaces with the wholeness of who I was. And so in kind of my want for this conversation and in talking with Dee-Dee about what this kind of series might encompass, felt like it was really, really important to talk about and to look at the ways that congregations are extending communities of care into our congregations, into our spiritual care spaces, recognizing that we have so many folks who are really suffering and suffering in silence. I mean, I'm a member at Judson Memorial Church here in New York City, and often I think we might think that we're more progressive than we are, but we are pretty progressive. And, was really astounded to hear after preaching a sermon on the spirit of harm reduction that there were congregants who had been members for decades and who had never really felt invited to show up again with the wholeness of who they were, with the stories of their children who were incarcerated due to substance use, or who themselves were navigating, a complex healing journey from substance use, people who were using medication for opioid or other substance use disorders who did not feel included in the kind of ways that we were talking about what recovery and all of this might look like. And so really wanting to engage communities of faith and faith leaders into this conversation, recognizing the significant impact that these spaces hold for folks. I don't know if Dee Dee, you have any other kind of thoughts about what brings you to this conversation?
I have
Or
many thoughts.
okay.
I'm going to interrupt. We've had a question asking us to define harm reduction. Now, I realize I will invite that person, Jill, who asked that great question, to listen to last week's, because we did define it there. But I wonder if we could briefly describe that. Anybody want to take that, or?
Sure. I know for myself,
ahead.
what harm reduction means to me is that we accept that people will do things that have risks and may cause themselves or others harm. And we seek to reduce the potential risk or harm of those behaviors when in agreement with the person, really recognizing the dignity, autonomy, and choice of that person, but seeking to provide whatever we're able to make it safer for whatever the things that they're engaged in. And I want to say one other thing, which is it recognizes that there is a spectrum of substance use. And so it is not a categorical binary of like all substance use is bad or it's not, because we're all engaged in some level of substance use. I mean, I don't personally know anybody who does not drink coffee, does not drink alcohol, does not use illicit substances, does not take any prescription medications off label, like, right, we eat sugar, so it's just really accepting. It's about this radical acceptance that people are going to do the things. So let's just try to minimize the harm that's caused.
Yeah. And I think too, in that point, I know that when we were talking about it last week, is there's a lot of kind of myths and misconceptions around harm reduction, and that harm reduction is just a free for all and all things go. And yet it's really, again, to the point of, dignity and also lifting up the ways that we understand that systems and make particular people more vulnerable to harm. So we are looking at people in the context of families and culture and society and all of these things, and the policies and all the things that potentially cause even more harm than the substances, right? So you talked about kind of our culture of punishment around substance use and resulting in really elevated levels of incarceration for folks rather than opportunities for healing. And so I think harm reduction in my mind also holds the real complex, does not seek to minimize that there are real harms associated with some
Right.
of these very human behaviors, but also recognizes people within the context and a greater context.
Yeah. And it also includes abstinence.
Sure.
Yeah. That's remind everybody right out loud that is, for some of us, that is our ultimate harm reduction. But that needs to be a personal choice. And that can change for some people as well. It's not necessarily hard and fast that I'm always going to be abstinent from a substance or all substances or whatever the risky behavior is. It reminds me, when I'm working with couples and families, one of the questions that I like to ask is, what risky behaviors are acceptable? And people are always surprised when I ask that and say, well, what do you mean? And I'll say, well, we've talked about kind of substance use, and oftentimes someone is upset with another loved one for using substances, and totally appreciate that. as someone who did that for a long time as well. And on the other hand, how about motorcycle riding, with or without a helmet, with or without chaps? How about, driving a car? Is it okay on the freeway? How about not wearing your seatbelt? How about what kind of car you're driving? Some are safer than others. All of these sort of different things to expand how we even view risky behaviors to start with. That's, we don't tell people, well, you can't do, well, most of us don't, you can't ride a bicycle, you can't skateboard if you're a kid or whatever it is, but we do try to make it safer.
And I
Should we
think
go to the next question?
well, I was just going to say that leads us right into the next question, which in some ways is a kind of continuation of our conversation last week. But how does the way that we talk about addiction, recovery, parenting, harm reduction shape the experience of families?
Oh, I have so much I want to say about this.
Please
So,
start it.
yeah, so we have so many binaries that exist in this conversation around substance use. And, there's, there's all these this either or in this black and white and these separations. And we really lose sight of that spectrum, that substance use exists on a spectrum, and so does wellness. And this thing that we call recovery, which, I was wholehearted, like 12-step Christian church, abstinence-based recovery. I was like all in until I started to realize, oh, wait, this works for someone like me, but it does not work for a lot of people. And I kind of outgrew that narrower version of recovery. And I saw how I started to fall out of love with it and started to learn about harm reduction and understand, oh, my experience is not everyone else's experience. But this idea, I think, when we think about for families, it's black and white. It's either or. My person is using or they're not using. They're safe or they're not safe. They're good or they're bad. One of the binaries that operates the strongest is that substance users are bad and people in recovery are good. And when I think about, listening to you, Erica, talk about church, I went to a year-long Christian rehab program. And when I got out, I was in 12-step and I went home and I joined a church, and that church was phenomenal for me. And I had not stopped using substances. And though I wasn't sharing that openly there, they loved me as a person in recovery, and they provided an incredible, I mean, just an incredible village for us. And Sophie talks about this as well. Like, we could not have done it, I don't think, as our tiny little family. I was not even in recovery. I had not stopped using when I got custody of Sophie back when she was 10 years old after 6 years without her. It took me a little bit longer, and church was part of that process because I had that safety net, the village, this community support, and all of that. But what I see is that we're happy to do that for people in recovery. We are not so happy to do that for people who use substances, especially for those who use problematically. And we get really busy defining who's in recovery and who's not, who's using problematically and who's not. And we lose sight of the fact that radical acceptance and radical love is actually the answer for literally everybody. And that we can love people, and accept people anywhere on the spectrum, without having to decide what label we're going to put on that. And so I think what happens for families is they, often aren't on the inside of this issue, experience, or whatever. And so they hear what's coming from the outside, and what's coming from the outside is the rhetoric of, it's the war on drugs and the messaging we get about that all substance users are bad people who chose it, and, all of that. And so it's very hard. And I just want to say one other thing about that is that it's really hard to love people who use really problematically. It's messy. it can be painful. It can be really hard to know what kind of decisions are helpful or unhelpful. It's hard. So it's not to minimize, it's easy to say, oh, we just radically love everybody. We know it's messy and difficult, but but so are so many other things that we are called to do. And I think that is, we just get caught, families get the messaging of tough love and don't enable and all of that. And what that does is it like rescinds love. It withdraws love. And I think it's the opposite of what we actually have to do. And I did that to Sophie. When I found out that she was smoking cannabis as a 14-year-old. I freaked out. I came down hard on her. I threatened detox. Like, it was all of the wrong things that I now know are the opposite of what she needed. I'll let her speak.
Mm,
Any
yeah.
other?
Yeah, I remember that day. It was like our 4 years of hard work of like trying to build that, that trust back together. And it was hard because I made a choice that my mom had made much younger than me. And to be hit with that judgment and that shame for a mistake that she had made, was really hard. And it broke our trust for a long time. It took until I moved out to really, I think, work through that. But I think a huge part of my wellness was all of the adults I had in my life. My church community played a huge part in my survival. The way that my community talked to me about my mom, like even when I was a very little kid, I was told, your mom's sick, she took too much medicine. And I didn't grow up with that shame or that stigma. Like, my mom got to be a person who was trying her best, a person that made mistakes and was still being loved. And so I didn't have to unlearn that, or forgive her for anything. And I think that if I had grown up in a different environment, I may have resented her. I may have wished that she had made different choices, or that my life had been or gone on a different course. But it was the people in my life showing us both love and forgiveness and giving us chances, that really showed me I'm worthy of love. I can make mistakes. I can use substances. Even if I use substances problematically, I have a soft place to land. And it's not tied to who I am or my worth. And I know that that's a privilege, that I didn't have to experience that shame. I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's a really, really beautiful
Dee-Dee.
facet. Dee-Dee, you're on mute, but I was wondering if you wanted to say anything about how this might show up
Sorry.
in some of
Thank
your work
you.
with families. Yes.
I forget when I have the dialogue box open, I can't just hit my space bar and get unmuted. There was I was saying thank you to you, Sophie, for that. That was really lovely. And one of the questions I think that's pertinent to this that just came up, do you think you would be on the path of radical love without the exposure to 12-step and a loving God?
Wow.
And I could even say perhaps those should be separated, because not everyone in 12-step also experiences a loving God. Right?
Mm-hmm. I haven't really thought about that too much, honestly. I do think I often hear other children of parents who have used substances problematically, that they wish that their parent had chosen them, and that they chose this substance over them and like their life or their family or whatever. And I lost my train of thought there.
we're talking about the radical love coming out of
Oh,
potentially 12 step and sort of your strength in the belief of God.
I knew that I was always going to be taken care of. I knew that no matter what, I was going to be forgiven, and that I was worthy. And I think that without that, I mean, what do you really have? I think without that, um, love for yourself. So.
Yeah, and often that comes from the connection that we manage to have, right? That is the importance of the work that we do with families and within congregations, another example of family, right? Of having that connection. And why one of the things that we've all talked about in some ways is how do we strengthen those connections, even when the person who's chaotically or problematically using substances is continuing to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what radical love is, right? How do I do this? And there is not a singular answer to that. Yeah, you're so right, Megan.
Yeah, and I think, about that question, will we have radical love if, would I have this sort of foundation without 12-step or church? And I think that, I have plenty to say about 12-step and who belongs there and its power and and all of that. What I will say is that I don't think it matters what the community is. If you have strong community, you can be held through these kinds of, experiences and challenges. And so for families, whether you find that community in church, whether you find that community somewhere else, there's like so many different groups now that, and there's still not enough. And our communities are fractured in a way that is, really hard to see. Even my own, I have I'm part of a campground that's an interdenominational Christian campground, and we are struggling to not be at war with one another in the current climate. Like we're struggling to maintain our ability to be a single unified community. And so 12-step has a lot of flaws. We know the Christian church as a whole and each of our denominations has a lot of flaws, and we're all sort of still seeking how to be unified in it. But I think that that concept of radical love is kind of, it supersedes all of it. And so whether you get that from a biological family or you get that from, a place that you provide services to, like the food pantry, civic duty, and like there's so many places that is a key to helping families, be able to connect and love and hold their loved ones who are using substances because they are being held.
Yeah.
So we have another good question here from Donald. How does one know when the radical love is critical to a healing journey and when it enables or perpetuates a problematic substance use? I'm going to invite Donald to, again, listen to last week. I think that would be a good foundation for this. Not that we won't answer it. Erica, go ahead.
No. I was going to also point back towards our conversation last week in ways that, I think we talked last week about the ways that care and love is weaponized against people who are supporting somebody or in relationship with somebody who uses drugs, and the just grave injury that causes. And so really that kind of shift in language that there is no such thing as enabling in my mind, right? We talked last week, you can enable hope, you can enable all these other things, you can enable connection, but enable healing, but with our language we're able to do exactly the opposite when we are levying words like this, which really, I think both of you talked about, is really just kind of a means of dividing us and disconnecting us and isolating us. And so thank you for that question.
Yeah, I mean, I love.
Go ahead. We have another one and then I'll jump to that. Go ahead, Megan.
I'll just share very quickly, hopefully. when I got custody of Sophie back, I had come out of incarceration. I had completed the program. I had moved back near my family. I had housing security because I was living in my grandmother's house. I had my family support. Our congregation bought us a truck and gave us work as contractors. So like I had all of these things going for me, and I was still using. And I got custody of my kid back, and I'm still using. And nothing radical happened.
Mm.
Nothing, there was no lightning bolt or terrible thing I suffered that was meant it was the last time that I used. Instead, it was the building up, it was the adding to my resources, support, capital. Like that's what helped me turn the corner. So I think, instead of withholding, we think about giving, what can we provide? What can we give? And there's no guarantees that you will get a return on that gift. And that's where that radical acceptance and that unconditional support comes from. Is
Absolutely.
people don't heal by having things taken away. People heal by being restored and being given the things that they are lacking. And so we can spin that whole kind of idea that is understandable. It's understandable how where people have that idea from. But I think it's indeed the absolute opposite is what helps people heal.
Yeah. And that's really at the heart, I believe, of the UCC and social justice. Social justice doesn't just happen for people out there. It's also about me, social justice for me and for my experiences. And that it also includes me. What work am I putting into this? And what changes am I willing to try, at least? And that changes from time to time. We had Diane who mentioned that she works in the field of housing and community outreach for women in recovery and says that they just opened a meditation 12 therapy garden. I think she meant 12-step therapy garden. We are firmly rooted in spreading all that you were talking about through peer support and outreach, which is fantastic. And I know that I think all of us, Erica, I think you're included in this, but correct me if I'm wrong, that we all started as peers. And long before they called it peers,
Yes.
I say it was called volunteers back when I was doing it, but that's how we started. So yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
thank you for sharing that.
And in this,
If-
go ahead,
Go
Megan.
ahead.
No, I was going to move us to the next question, so I'm ready for you to.
I was just going to share a quick anecdote because I do a lot of work, again, with parents of adult children, right, who have problematic substance use. And I just want to share an anecdote of a woman I know named Lori. She's very active in this space, and her son Jesse just struggled and struggled and struggled with problematic use and had multiple overdoses, and she did all the usual, like, you can't come here and I'm changing the locks, and did that for years, and just was not getting anywhere. Jesse wasn't improving his quality of life, and so she brought him home. She brought him home, and she would sit outside the bathroom door while he injected drugs, so that she was there in case anything happened. And she loved him, and she drove him where he needed to go and took care of him and allowed him to use in her house. And she really firmly believes that the recovery that he has today, he is living an excellent life, and no longer uses problematically, and they have a great relationship. And she firmly believes that it was only when she was able to provide some of those things for him, and as painful and hard as that sounds, is to sit outside the bathroom door, and that broke her heart. It was healed and restored because she had an ability to have an impact that she couldn't when she pushed him away.
It's such a great story. And I think it also dovetails into a question that we've had from Sherry, who says, what do you imagine as the quote unquote goal for a congregation walking with someone on their healing journey? And I know I would say, I think the goal is connection.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And
And
Go, Sophie.
I think I would add consistency to that. I think it's knowing that your community is going to be there consistently for you, not just when it's hard, not just when it's good, but through it all, I think is really important.
Thanks. Can I move this into a slightly different direction? Sorry, we're getting kind of off the questions here, Eric.
No, it's okay. It's totally okay.
We've had another question from Michelle. Such a great conversation, and thanks to everyone for sharing today. I would love to hear from the panelists their perspectives on how the criminalization of drug use impacts family relationships and what we can do from a policy reform perspective to encourage real healing.
Yes,
It tears us apart.
it does.
It tears us apart. I spent much of my pregnancy incarcerated. And then when I got out, I was forced to stop taking methadone, which had been really helpful for me so that I could participate in a drug court program for selling $40 of heroin to my own heroin dealer way before I even got pregnant. And I was not using at the time that I got arrested. And then I went to jail over and over the first 18 months of Sophie's life, including my first Mother's Day. And, you know, that secure attachment in early childhood, in infancy and newborn is so important. And I just kept getting taken out for things like lying. I went to jail on Mother's Day for lying. It gives us tools that we think we should use that are actually super destructive, like civil commitments, where I can go to court and say, my son is a danger to himself and others. And so then they're going to arrest your son and incarcerate him with a treatment program in an environment in which people cannot heal. We cannot heal while incarcerated. We cannot heal. And so this approach of removal, right, which is going to disappear you and put you into a traumatic system where you're cut off from everything, is the antithesis of what is needed. And our families are out here clamoring for more extreme, laws around fentanyl and for, more ability to civilly commit people, and because it's the only tool they're given. But that tool is a weapon. It's not a tool. And it's a weapon that rips families apart from each other and keeps eroding away the fabric that actually holds us together. And yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. And so many families don't heal from that. I think that's what I love about the story that you two bring to us, is that there is hope, there is healing that can happen. But for too many, that won't be their journey.
Yeah. And I think I'd add that while healing has happened with us, we still feel the effects of the separation, from like an emotional standpoint, but also from a physiological standpoint. Growing up, you want to hug your mom, or you're jumping around, and I felt a lot of limitations just because physically coming out of jail and detox, it's hard having people up close in your space or being loud. And so that was a huge barrier for us growing up, was that physical barrier. And now we're still trying to repair that big separation. Because I think I was a bit parentified. I was 10 years old. I was set in my ways when we were unified or reunited. And we were both learning how do we do this? How do we do the mother-daughter? And we're still working on it. So I think that has had probably that's the biggest impact on my life was the physical separation.
Thanks
And
for
the
that,
fact that I
Sophie.
couldn't chaperone I could not chaperone a field trip at her school because I had a criminal record. Like there were so many things we couldn't do, just because I couldn't parent normally, even years into resolving my use.
And I still have loved ones that are incarcerated for their substance use. And I don't think I'll ever not have somebody in my life that is going through something like that and being treated unfairly.
We have a comment from Diane, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, Erica, as we're in our last few minutes here. I lost my niece who overdosed because her mom, who worked nights, did not arrive home to administer Narcan as usual. Needing to stop for gas, isolation is deadly, but risky behavior cannot always be abated by another's diligence.
True.
Absolutely. And I'd also put in a plug here for never use alone. There are now at least 3 call-in. I don't know that all 3 of them are national. I think one might be statewide and 2 are national. But ways that people can try to prevent overdose from even happening, or if it does, that EMTs will be sent out so that people are not using alone.
There is no zero risk or zero harm toolkit.
That's correct. There's no safe drug use of any kind.
And so families cannot be heroes. They cannot be saviors, as desperately as we want to mitigate, the ramifications, which we know so much of the damage of substance use just comes from criminalization and the ways that it's treated. And if we normalized it and accepted that it existed, there wouldn't be nearly so much harm being caused by it. But, we can't fix or, save or whatever. But I think, if there's one thing that families can do and congregations can do and, entire denominations can do, it is to figure out what does radical acceptance and love of substance use and substance users look like. Because when we do a much better job of loving the people in recovery and making them kind of these heroic figures, and we love them. We love these redemption stories. But when we love from inception, sort of when we love across the whole spectrum of substance use, everything good and everything needed comes from that. And so if we can love the users, love the families, love the people in recovery, love everybody, across that journey. And so figuring out what does that look like and what do we need to do systemically to make that happen.
Before Ellie joins us to wrap us up, I wanted to give each of you a chance to say, if every faith leader and lay leader who saw this webinar did one thing differently after this afternoon, what would you hope it would be? And I will say that what I would hope it would be is to have these really difficult conversations and to make space for brave conversations around substance use.
Good. So
yeah, I would just ask everybody to be curious. I think that we talk a lot about how do we keep people well and how do we support them, and I don't think as many of us think about that their voices are just as important. They have this they need to be heard, and have so much to contribute to their communities. And I think it's I think we need to uplift their voices and focus more on that.
Thank you.
yeah, I would just say, listen to our young people, and engage them and invite them in, especially those who have lived with parents with problematic use and have been unwilling participants in the criminal justice system as a secondary trauma, and really just fight for us to have a safe supply of substances so people don't have to die because they are seeking relief.
Jill says to be honest and open in conversation.
Mhm. Yeah. I think you don't have to agree with or understand anybody's choices to support them.
Yeah. Yeah.
She said.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Especially to Sophie and Megan for being here
Yes.
today and sharing all this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Wow, y'all, I went to church today. There was so much beauty and wisdom and love and curiosity and care and nurturing in this space. I am forever honored, and so, so grateful to the four of you who are joining us this week and having these really important conversations. I will be meandering through my thoughts and reflections on this for some time. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you for those who have joined live, for those who are going to rewatch it and share a link with their friend, or for those who are watching later down the road. Thank you so much for taking time to just engage in these conversations. I want to thank all of you here on the screen for joining us, of course, as well. And I look forward to supporting you in whatever way that is as our continual days go on. And I want to thank our tech and media team for helping to make this and all of our webinars possible, both in live form and in post-viewing form. I want to invite you all back for our next webinar, which is Monday, September 22nd, where we're going to be joined by Reverend Marshala Salgado. And we're going to dive into an engaging conversation to explore how art can deepen and enrich worship. Reverend Salgado will share about her work with the congregation and what they've done to promote various forms of art in worship, from art shows to different series. And we'll also offer both theological insights and hands-on ideas for integrating arts in ways that speak to the heart and the spirit of your congregation. And then next Thursday, we'll be back, and hopefully I won't be here. I just got notice, Erica. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I won't be here, but Reverend Erica will be leading the way and opening us up next week. And so we're here for part 3, where we're practicing harm reduction for clergy and lay leaders, how changing our minds help the people we love and serve and ourselves. We're going to again hear from Erica and Dee-Dee as they look at the broader issue of countertransference in clergy's work with families, and then have a whole bunch of questions to help guide us. They're also going to discuss how harm reduction approach can give us a better and more effective way to work with those who are using drugs and their families. And so all of our hearts align. It is just such an honor and a gift to be in this ministry work with you, Reverend Erica and Dee-Dee and Sophie and Megan. Blessings to you for sure. And Erica, I'm going to turn it over to you for a benediction.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, utmost, such an honor to be on this webinar with you all and to get to know Megan and Sophie. What a gift. So please join me in this benediction. God, as you journey with us in the coming week, help us to see one another as you see us, beloved children who can do nothing to be separated from your affection. Mold our imagination so that we might envision and then create a world where people who use drugs and people who love people who use drugs live full lives free of oppression, stigma, and disconnection. We know you want to give us a kinder, more just world, and we are ready to receive it. Amen.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry, or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.